Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here. Welcome back to Tesla Daily. Welcome to Q4. Today we're actually talking about Q3 still, as we did just get the release for the Q3 delivery and production report from Tesla. So we'll go through the results here and just talk about the impact of the results this morning. All right, so looking at the release from Tesla, we'll hop down to production and deliveries. Tesla production came in at 430,488 vehicles in total. Deliveries slightly ahead of that, 435,059 vehicles. So production pretty much in line with my expectations. Deliveries a little bit lower and pretty significantly lower than analyst expectations, right around, let's see, make sure I don't misquote the consensus here. Analyst consensus was 454,809. My estimate was around 444,000 or 445,000. So coming in lower than both of those expectations, but again, a little bit higher than production. As we had talked about with consensus, my view or my opinion at the time was that the actual expectations were probably a little bit lower than the sort of whisper number or true expectations. As we saw, a lot of analysts updated numbers and brought them down towards the end of the quarter. Not every single analyst is going to do that though, and that was a reflection of the downtime that we knew about at Giga Shanghai for the Highland transition and what we saw in Texas. So anyone that didn't update prior to that may have still had extra production included for that and therefore potentially extra deliveries. So we'll talk more about those in a second. We'll hop into Excel. Just a couple other things to note with this release though. Tesla did say, sequential decline in volumes caused by planned downtimes for factory upgrades, as discussed on the Q2 earnings call. They also say that their 2023 volume target of around 1.8 million vehicles remains unchanged. Says around 1.8 million. It would be nice if that said above 1.8 million, but nevertheless somewhere around 1.8 million. So a little bit softer language there that could be interpreted by some in that way. Doesn't necessarily mean that, but could be interpreted that way. And then finally, Tesla is going to post the third quarter results after market close on Wednesday, October 18th. That is when I would have expected it. A lot of times people will say that that is early, but that's pretty much the calendar it's fallen on. Though I wouldn't have been too surprised if it was a little bit later. Obviously, we've got the CFO transition happening right now, but nevertheless, Tesla kind of sticking with that normal schedule. So we'll get Q3 earnings in just over 2 weeks from now. All right, let's just quickly look at the stock, see what the reaction is. I'm guessing probably not great so far. Yeah, so down 4%. No surprise with that, missing, I think, both the analyst consensus, but then also the whisper number, which seemed to be, more in line with the 445-ish. That was kind of where I ended up. But nevertheless, a miss of kind of broader expectations, I think, being reflected in the share price right now. As we can see, the futures are down a little bit in the general markets too. Probably not helping, but probably not going to be the best trading day for Tesla today. All right, let's hop over to Excel and we can put this in context, which is obviously always the most important thing. Give me 1 second on that. All right, I've got deliveries up, but let's start with production. So as we can see, my production estimate, which is the one that I spend more time on and care more about, as I know beforehand, pretty close, within about 500 vehicles, I think 574 difference here. There is a pretty significant difference, though, in kind of where this happens, at least between the S and the X. So I didn't mention that specifically before, but for Model S and Model X, production was 13,688. Deliveries were 15,985. So both of those numbers are going to be down sequentially quarter over quarter. Production pretty significantly so. If I flip back, and I know I'm showing Excel for you guys, but let me just flip back quickly and look at Q2 numbers specifically for S and X. That was 19,500 for production, 19,200 for deliveries. So again, a pretty significant sequential decline for S and X, and we did have the significant price cuts for S and X this quarter as well. So not the strongest reflection, that part of the business, but that obviously then means that the Model 3 and Model Y exceeded what I had forecast in here for production. All right, so we can see the total number there. I'll update that in a second, but let's just get this corrected here because again, that's a pretty decent difference. So if we do that, that means that there is, again, increased production from other areas. Maybe that's coming from Berlin or Texas, Shanghai. Again, we don't know all these numbers yet. We should get the Shanghai production numbers for for September in about a week. So we'll keep an eye out for those. But in the meantime, I'm just going to add these back to Fremont. You can see that, based on just my estimates here. Let's see. There we go. I had expected a Model 3 decline in Fremont. Maybe we didn't see that happen, and maybe that's what's increasing the number. Maybe we had additional production out of Berlin or Texas or Shanghai. So we'll get a better idea of that pretty soon. But for now, let's just see what the difference here is. And we'll net that out quick. And then we can also talk about deliveries here. So that's going to be, let me just take away a couple hundred here. And we'll get everything to match. All right, so there we can see our actual. Again, we'll try to sort out better between the factories a little bit later on. But Q3 down 10% quarter over quarter for production from the roughly 480,000 in Q2. Again, that's a result of the downtime that Tesla noted in the Q2 call, specifically at Shanghai and at Texas. We're aware of significant downtime there, as we talked about in our sort of forecasting episode. And then Q3 still up 18% year over year. So last year Q3 was 366,000 or so. Obviously a little bit of turmoil in the numbers last year. You can see most of that happening in Q2, but even early in Q3 last year there was some shorter production or smaller production in July in Shanghai, but nevertheless still an 18% increase year over year. All right, let's hop to deliveries now. We'll probably come back to production in a second, but let's just get the delivery number in here. So give me 1 second on that. All right, so we're 435,059. All right, so we can see that most interestingly, the change in inventory was about 4,500 vehicles, 4,600 vehicles, reduced inventory. So that still is going to leave Tesla with roughly 16 days of inventory. As we walk through the math on that, this is calculated based on, you take the quarterly delivery number divided by 75. That is 1 day technically of inventory. And then subtract what we had previously had disclosed of 16 days inventory last quarter times that same metric, leaving us with roughly 94,000 vehicles in stock or in inventory. A lot of those are going to be in transit. Obviously, we're aware of ships with Highland Model 3 on them that are on their way to Europe right now. So stuff like that, showroom vehicles. And then if you just browse through, US or European inventory, you can see that there are still some vehicles that are, probably in your area that are available. So there's still inventory like that. Now, I definitely would have liked to see a bigger drawdown here because, we can see that Tesla's got inventory. The 16 days or 95,000, however you want to look at the inventory figure, this is still a higher inventory number than what Tesla has had for, the last, excluding last quarter, the trailing 4 quarters prior to that. So Tesla can operate on leaner inventory. However, during this period, Tesla has also been transitioning to try to flatten the delivery wave, and we have been seeing that with sort of the sequential schedules of when ships have departed Shanghai and kind of the flow of, retail versus export that we see out of Shanghai, things like that. So that has been happening, but nevertheless, I think additional inventory here that probably Tesla could have, had available to sell in greater quantities. So potentially, it's unclear exactly from these numbers how big of a sort of demand related issue or sales related issue it is versus inventory and allocation and things like that. But this number, I think, is going to at least put some concern out there that this, was a little bit more constrained by demand than simply a result of the lower production number. Now, anytime you get more cars out there, that's going to help. People want their specific configuration. They maybe want to buy it that same day. If that configuration isn't there in inventory and they're seeing, it's going to be a month out, they may not want the vehicle or may not order it, things like that. So it does matter. Just the extent of to which it matters is obviously a bit opaque. Nevertheless, I think that's going to be a bit of a concern for the market participants, at least at this time. Obviously, we'll hear a bit more from that or on that from Tesla on the Q3 call. All right, so sequential and year-over-year difference here. So down 7% sequentially. Again, that's versus down 10% for production. And then Q3 year-over-year, up 27%. So last year, we're at about 344,000, about 100,000 more vehicles, a little bit less than that this year. And again, 18% increase in production, so 27% increase in deliveries. All right, trying to think of what else we should discuss here. Maybe I'll take a look at the comments for a second. Trying to think if there's anything else major that we went through in terms of what to expect. So obviously, as we talked about with the delivery, forecast episode, this quarter I think is a little bit less meaningful in terms of what we can extrapolate from here, because of those production shutdowns. Even product-wise, we saw a major update to the Model 3. So even if we are talking about, there's like potentially inventory or demand concerns, which one other point that we definitely need to make on that too. But even if that's sort of the perception, Tesla had product updates. Even this weekend, we saw the Model Y, which I guess we can talk about. But even this weekend, we saw the Model Y in China be updated to include ambient lighting. They changed the wheels. But obviously with Model 3, significant updates, which was going to put some pressure on Model 3 sales, specifically, in China and Europe where the update is being made, but then also here in the US, in North America, where obviously in today's day and age, we can see that those updates have been made. People are going to expect those to potentially come over and maybe withhold purchases until then. So things like that obviously put some pressure on sales and inventory and things like that as well. And then the other thing that, is critical to understand with inventory, critical to mention with inventory, although the inventory kind of stayed the same here, a little bit of a drawdown, this is still very, 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 very low relative to other automakers. Generally, the norm in the industry is, somewhere around probably like 10 weeks is historically what it's been. So, maybe 70 days of inventory. But that's been a little bit rockier with, COVID and supply shortages and things like that. Maybe that number's moved down to, 50 or something now. But obviously, many multiples of the the days of inventory that Tesla is generally sitting on. Certainly, the discrepancy was really, really crazy before. That's shrunk a little bit. Largely due to the unwinding of the wave and I think just high interest rates and some of the, price cutting maneuvers Tesla's had to do this year with demand, but still sitting on a much, much lower inventory number than most of their competition. So it is important to keep that in mind, even if on a sequential basis, not much of a decline here, the inventory figure is still quite low relative to other automakers. All right, I wish I had my water here. My mouth's a little dry this early in the morning. Trying to think if there's anything else to mention on production. So we talked about Shanghai. We'll get that figure soon, and that'll give us a little bit more insight into how the distribution is between these factories. Again, for that forecast, I had not a lot of production for Model 3 and sort of just similar production for Model Y to the last couple of months, as we can kind of see there. I'll maybe covering some of that up, but the number shouldn't be super far off of that, I wouldn't think. It would be pretty unprecedented for a Model Y figure to be significantly higher than that. And Model 3, we know that the transition's happening, so anything significantly higher than that would also be surprising. So I would imagine the differences are probably more related to 3 and Y in Fremont, or Berlin and Texas maybe just doing a little bit better than what I had forecast in here. Those are also pretty opaque because we don't get the kind of reports that we get out of Shanghai for these other factories. So we just kind of have to do our best guess at how the allocation splits between those two. All right, S and X. So we talked a little bit about S and X. I think it's a bit disappointing to see, a much lower number here. If we go back the last few quarters, you can see this is actually the lowest S and X production since the end of 2021. They were kind of still ramping up at that point from the refresh, which you can see that was Q1 2021. So we're looking at this column here. You can see that the ramp up kind of went, a couple thousand, up to 10,000, up to about 15,000, up to about 20,000, and then kind of level off around 20,000, but now a significant drop. So, maybe there were things going on with S and X too that caused Tesla to have a little bit of downtime there in Fremont for the S and the X. But when you see that, and then you also see the significant price cuts where we saw, around 17% price cuts on the S and the X, then you have lower production on top of that. Not necessarily the best sign, but at least deliveries did outpace that production number on the S and the X. And like I mentioned before, when you do have that lower number, that does mean that there's additional, Model 3 and Model Y that were produced that weren't in my forecast, which is probably a better thing in terms of, extrapolating from here. Like I said, it's limited what we can do with that this quarter. As we head into Q4, we don't necessarily know what Texas production rate is going to be after the Model Y downtime they've had. We don't necessarily know what Highland Model 3 production is going to be or what that ramp is going to look like. And those are probably the two most important figures for how we, build production rates and production numbers for quarters from this point. All right, let me take a look through the comments. Appreciate you guys joining me here in the morning. Let's maybe take a quick look at the stock. Flip back. Just kind of see how the market's reacting here. Again, expecting probably not great. Looks like we're getting a little bit of a bounce back, a couple dollars. So only down 3% right now, if that's the extent of it, which, you know, I'd be a little bit surprised if that is, but if that's the extent of it, you know, certainly would take that. You know, if you just use the consensus number, which is what the headlines are going to do and kind of create the perception of today. Let's see what that would be. Yeah, like 435. I have to look over my microphone. Yeah, so about, you know, 4.5% difference between sort of the analyst consensus. Again, that's probably higher than reality, but about a 4.5% difference there from consensus to the actual results. All right, let's see. I'm just going to take a look through the comments, see if there's any good questions or call outs. Good point from Damon. Did any other car company that makes over 1 million vehicles a year grow this much year over year? I mean, BYD maybe. They're probably right in that sort of a bucket. And they're probably actually growing faster than Tesla. Obviously got to separate out hybrids and battery electric from that. If you're talking just EVs, they're probably not there, just off my recollection, but they are growing quite quickly. Other than that, they're probably not. High interest rate, yeah, that's obviously been a factor. That's going to be a factor for a while. Someone says Highland is literally being sold. I'm not sure what that's in reference to, but yep, Highland is, you know, obviously starting deliveries now in Europe, or, you know, shipping over to Europe. Deliveries maybe not necessarily started yet, but that'll happen soon. And then Tesla will, I think, probably, they'll do a little bit of a wave there. You know, they've been unwinding it, but I think they'll do a little bit of a wave there with how they approach Highland deliveries, shipping a bunch out to Europe. And then once those are ready to deliver, once they make it to the European ports and are ready to offload, they'll probably then sort of at that point flip over and start delivering to China. So those are happening kind of at the same time. All right, just reading through the comments here. All right, so a good point by someone on how much do we have left to get to sort of guidance for the year. I'll flip back to Excel and we can take a look at that. So year to date, right now we're sitting at 1.324. I think that's right. Let's see, that kind of, yeah. Okay, that's right. I'm just a little slow in the morning. So 476,000 deliveries needed in Q4 to hit 1.8 million vehicles. So Tesla's saying around there, giving themselves, again, a little bit of flexibility if they come in a bit below that. But certainly I would think that would be a number that would be accomplishable in the fourth quarter. I mean, you can look at Q2, obviously 466,000, and that was with inventory increasing pretty significantly. So if you actually go over to production, you know, you got 400 something. Oh, that's sorry, different version of the sheet. So Q2 production about 480,000 versus deliveries 466,000. So, you know, if Highland can ramp quickly, if there's not more downtime in Q4, then Tesla should pretty easily have enough vehicles produced plus in inventory, especially since that didn't drain that far this quarter, to be able to hit 476,000 and get to that 1.8 million. Plus maybe we'll get some Cybertruck deliveries in there. Obviously not going to be a meaningful contributor, but we should now, since we're in Q4, hopefully this is the quarter for those first deliveries of Cybertruck. A couple of pieces of news. This will probably be the only episode for today, unless there's, you know, something significant later on today, but just a couple of pieces of news. Obviously, I mentioned the sort of refresh or, you know, like micro update for that's probably diminishing it too much, but a little bit of an update for the Model Y in or out of Giga Shanghai. They've added the ambient lighting. They've also changed the wheels Previously, they were, the gray or silver color for the aero caps. Those are now black and dark gray. I think it's a much better look, personally. I've always kind of been... I apologize if people have these wheels and like them, but they've always perplexed me a bit. I think Tesla had them on the base Model Y to try to convince people to upgrade the wheels. Obviously, that'll drive better margins. These ones, I think, look much, much better, though. So exciting to see that. Although maybe not for margins if there's less upgrades, fewer upgrades. But nevertheless, some changes there. I think the 0 to 60 time also improved on the base version of the Model Y by maybe a second, which would be pretty significant, but I have to double check on that. And then and sorry, I don't have the news up here, but and then on the Cybertruck, there's also the Peterson Museum has announced that they're going to be auctioning off a Cybertruck on October 7th. At this point, I have to assume that means that they're going to actually deliver that vehicle much later, or later than October 7th. I think if Tesla was going to do a delivery event at this point before October 7th, we would probably know. You never know with Tesla, but I don't take that date as any sort of hard concrete date that we'll have more Cybertruck information by. Certainly would love to, but I'm not taking it to necessarily mean that. All right. Continuing to look through some comments. Someone asked when are the numbers coming out. They're out. I think that was a while ago, but all right, let me catch up. Inventory number of days are the same. Yep, so that's still 16 days. Final delivery number 435,000. Someone says, hey, click like, please. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks, Mark. Does help out. All right. Winston, thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks for the support. Does anyone know which font he uses? Let me tell you, Calibri in this document. Not what I usually use, but all right. Well, I think that's about it for now. Just see what the stock is doing. Flip back. Yeah, so we're at 243, down 2.5%, 2 2/3%. Not too bad. Hopefully it'll kind of hold up around there. And then again, if you missed it, just a couple of things Tesla sort of reiterated. 2023 volume target of around 1.8 million vehicles remains unchanged. So, people will probably criticize me for reading into that, but that's what analysts do. They're going to look at that and say that that's softer language, even though they say remains unchanged. You gotta look at those things really closely with companies. A lot of times, whether or not it's intentional or not, TBD. I do think the Q4 target of 476,000 deliveries is very achievable, pending the Highland ramp. But it's just a little bit softer of language than it would be if it said, above 1.8 million vehicles. And then the Q3 report, that'll be on Wednesday, October 18th. Again, some people will probably say that's early. That's not my opinion of it. That would be the normal schedule for Tesla. All right. Well, I hope everyone has a great day. Again, this will probably be the episode for today, unless we get anything crazy during the day today. But that'll wrap it up, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. As always, thanks for listening. You can also find me on X at Tesla Podcast. And again, we'll see you tomorrow for the Tuesday, October 3rd episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.